T.J. Watt and Myles Garrett. How do they compare?
Well, I think when you look at it, T.J. Watt obviously had the better numbers, but he's also, I think, a better player against the run. So he kind of all around, he's a better player. I think Myles Garrett is the better pure pass rusher. Put your hand on the ground, explode up the field, and beat tackles with your speed, your athletic ability, and your power. But in the end, I went with Watt because I think he had a little bit better season than Myles Garrett did.
Will?
Yeah, I mean, that's why he won Defensive Player of the Year. I think it's kind of fascinating that T.J. Watt is like the brother of J.J. Watt, multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year, and everybody's like, well, he can't be that good. Let's let him drop to 30th in the draft. Like the Steelers stole him there. I think both of these guys are somewhere in the range of 6-1, I think, to win Defensive Player of the Year in 2022. We're nitpicking when we're comparing them. Both are just elite pass rushers. I do agree that Watt had the better season overall. Garrett, I think if you were taking somebody just for their pure upside and what they might eventually become if they unlock everything in their arsenal, I think you'd probably take Garrett. But I mean, both guys well deserving of the top 10 nod here.
Yeah, no disagreement at all. I think Pete hit it exactly on the head in terms of explaining what those players do well. I don't know if T.J. Watt ever takes a play off. Sometimes Myles Garrett, he doesn't necessarily disappear, but in big games, especially late last season when everything was going sideways for that team, starting with Baker Mayfield, it seemed like the defense wasn't always showing up. I think at times that T.J. Watt carried that football team because they were certainly struggling offensively, and he did it without playing one game. He tied that sack record. So no issue with this ranking. It makes all the sense in the world. And if one was 7 and one was 8 instead of 7 and 9, I would have no issue with that either.
All right, we've mostly been discussing top 10 players in Pete Prisco's list. Let's move down a little bit into the 20s. And a good topic of conversation for quarterbacks here at 20 and 21. Justin Herbert, 20, ahead of Joe Burrow, 21. We know how highly you think of Joe Burrow. Almost won a Super Bowl last season. Why do you have him behind Justin Herbert, who hasn't been to the playoffs yet?
Well, I think highly of both these guys. I mean, I think Justin Herbert is truly a special talent. He hadn't got there yet. You always joke and give me crap about fire in the belly and the desire to win and elevating his teammates. That's what Joe Burrow does. But from a pure talent standpoint, I think Justin Herbert is more talented as a thrower of the football. I mean, he's thrown 69 touchdown passes in 2 seasons. I know Burrow got to the Super Bowl, and this guy hasn't won a playoff game, so you give him kudos for that. Ideally, I'd rank him even. And I've said this before. Me picking between these 2 young quarterbacks is like a parent picking between his 2 favorite children. I can't do it. But I had to put one above him, so I went with the more talented quarterback rather than Joe Burrow.
Ryan, what do you think?
What about if you pick him between your 2 favorite cats, Pete? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's true.
You just don't. You can't do it.
He doesn't have kids, he doesn't have dogs, but he's got cats.
I do have cats.
And
they sick them on you.
Here's the thing. I lean towards Justin Herbert, and I say it all the time. And to Pete's credit, he was on Justin Herbert coming into the draft. He didn't have a great senior season in Oregon, and I was concerned how that would translate. Clearly, Pete and the Chiefs know more than, the Chargers know more than I do. I was actually talking to someone on that staff, and they're not even kidding when they said to me they think Justin Herbert's going to be as good, if not better, than Patrick Mahomes. That's exactly what you need in that division. I would rank him slightly above Joe Burrow as well, primarily for the athleticism. Obviously, Joe Burrow's winning football games and doing it not with necessarily less. The offensive line was certainly less. He has the playmakers on the outside. But now that the offensive line shored up, this list could look certainly different next year if Joe Burrow has time to throw in the pocket. But no issue with this at 2021. I don't want to say it because Ruben will tweet it out, but I think Tom Brady's too high, but we're not talking about that right now. I'm just looking at the graphic. But I love Justin Herbert at 20 and no issue with Joe Burrow right behind him.
You don't have to let every terrible take that pops in your head come flying out of your mouth, man. I highly recommend installing a filter at some point, Wilson. Otherwise, you're just going to be obliterated. That's true. I know. I don't want you to take my job. Look, I don't know that I've been as wrong as I was about Justin Herbert ever since I started doing this job. And I definitely haven't been as wrong as quickly as I was about Justin Herbert when I said he wasn't going to be very good coming out of the draft. He's awesome. He can make every throw. His athleticism is, it's up there with, name whoever you want, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. He's in that same class. And of course these guys are going to be compared. Pete mentioned on the podcast, he pointed out, it's like, Manning and Brady. Like that's the comp for these two guys, and the ceiling that's a legitimate ceiling. Like either one of these guys could win the MVP next year. And the thing about Burrow, I guess the difference is if I knew I needed my quarterback to win me one game, I'm taking Burrow. But if I'm picking somebody just for their pure upside physically and what they'll be able to do, again, if you unlock all of their potential, I think Herbert probably beats him. But man, I mean, it's really, really close. And I hate giving Pete credit, but I don't blame him for lumping them together. And I would guess that this time next year, they're probably like 6 and 7 or something like that. And he will probably, for the rest of his career, their careers, pin them right next to each other as long as they keep being productive and playing at the level we expect from them.
This is so weird. We have guys, Will, Ryan, myself, we can say we're wrong. It's so different than when Brady Quinn is here, isn't it?
I didn't know if you would say his name or not.
Pretty amazing.
I figured you'd get that in. Hey, Ryan, since you brought it up, we're just going to go ahead and let you explain yourself. Pete Prisco ranks Tom Brady number 6 in his top 100 list. And I think some might say that's just too low. I mean, he's the greatest player of all time. He should be top 5. Ryan, why do you think that's too high?
He got bumped by Cooper Kupp inside the top 5, so Pete can answer for that. Here's the thing. Like, Tom Brady is the all-time greatest quarterback in the history of civilization. There's no doubt about it. But now he's 45 or whatever. And here's my concern. And Pete, can speak to this. If you're going back on his history of his career, yeah, he deserves to be top 6. If we're looking forward a little bit, my concern is that he was thinking about dabbling in buying the Dolphins. He retired for 6 weeks until Giselle got tired of him, kicked him out of the house. He's talking about owning other sporting teams. He's getting into acting. He basically, and I've talked to Brinson about this on the Pick 6 podcast, feels like Will Ferrell after Old School came out, and then you see him every time you turn around. And basically, I'm just tired of seeing Tom Brady. And so that has more to do with it than certainly all the accolades and accomplishments and Super Bowls that Tom Brady has to his name, and more just frustrating without not being able to turn around and see him on a Hertz commercial or smiling about something else or selling avocado ice cream. And again, he's 45. How invested is he in terms of playing football for the next year or two based on how the last 3, 4, 5 months went?
Wilson is bitter.
Well, he threw for 5,300 yards and 43 touchdown passes last year. What are you talking about?
It's the most passing yards in Tom Brady's career.
What are you watching, Wilson? You've been watching too many quarterbacks at East Kentucky Prep. You got to watch the NFL.
Tom Brady has 3 different
Did you hear what I just
Hall
said?
of Fame careers inside his career, and he just for the most passing yards of his entire life, he threw for 43 touchdowns, 12 picks, completed 68% of his passes, did it at the age of 44 while losing some of his receivers, and you want to throw the man out of the top 10? You lost your mind. Also, the Will Ferrell thing makes sense, but the Old School is the wrong delineation. It's much later than Old School. Quit saying that.
This is what I deal with every day, guys, on the Pick 6 podcast.
I feel bad for Ryan today.
Has he done too many mock drafts?
Thank you.
I'm telling you, he's been watching too many quarterbacks from East Kentucky University, some school out there.
Well, let's talk running backs now, okay? And the top-ranked running back from Pete Prisco is Derrick Henry at number 22, just ahead of Jonathan Taylor at 24.
And people say, well, Jonathan Taylor had a better year last year. Well, Derrick Henry got hurt. He was on his way to winning the rushing title. He would have won the rushing title. He had 900 and something yards when he got hurt. And I think, people will say, oh, well, he's getting beat up. He's not the same guy. That's because he has all those carries. There is one concern, and this was concerning to me. His yards per carry came down, which is something you look for in a running back. But I think their offensive line was bad last year. At times, it was horrible. I mean, they made Chandler Jones a bunch of money in the first week of the season. Let's put it that way. So I think he was hurt by all that. Jonathan Taylor plays behind a better line. I think Derrick Henry right now is the reason. That's the reason why he's ahead of him. And it's close. You could have gone either way with that.
Brinson, you buying that?
No, I think Jonathan Taylor had a better year, and you'd be like, yeah, he got hurt. Well, that's because that's a problem. Like, he got hurt. He didn't play the whole season. You know who did? Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor almost dragged Carson Wentz to the playoffs. Durability matters, I think, and especially when you talk about a guy like Derrick Henry, who it did look like for a while there that he was just never going to get injured. That the Titans could give him as many carries as they wanted, and it would never bite them in the butt, and it eventually did. Like, he had way too much usage early in the season. It came back to haunt them, and as a result, Henry didn't get to play a full season. I would definitely put Taylor ahead of him. Love Derrick Henry, but Jonathan Taylor the better player right now.
So now my options are coming down to who do I want to agree with, so I don't have to hear all the backlash with these stupid retorts from these idiots. So I'm going to agree with Brinson. I think Brinson's exactly right. I would have actually put Jonathan Taylor slightly ahead of Derrick Henry, and Brinson actually somehow made some cogent points as to why. Prisco, I do want to ask you, however, are you really going to have Nick Chubb behind Dalvin Cook? Because that was a question.
Well, in large part, I have Nick Chubb behind Dalvin Cook because I think Dalvin Cook, A, is a better all-around running back, but B, whenever you put somebody behind that line, it doesn't matter who it is, they run the football. We've seen
that line being
the Cleveland Browns. Everybody runs the football. We saw Dearness Johnson go in late in the season and run the football behind that line. So that's why I have Dalvin Cook ahead of him. I think Dalvin Cook's a little better of a player. They're close, though. I mean, look at 41, 45, and 47 for Cook, Kamara, and Chubb. That's close.
Okay, those are the running backs in Pete Prisco's top 100. One of these years, it's going to dwindle down to 0 running backs.
Because that's the value of them.
Let's talk about a wide receiver who's making his top 100 debut, Deontay Johnson. He's above some big names, Pete. DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Evans, and A.J. Brown. Why?
Well, I think what you saw from him was, look, he didn't play with a great quarterback last year. Let's be honest about that. And he still put up monster numbers. And if you go look at what he did, he was week in and week out. Everybody knew. Remember, he didn't have a lot of help around him. There was no Juju Smith-Schuster on that roster last year, and he was hurt from a lot of the season. So I think the focus was on him. And remember, everybody always said the consistency thing with him, catching the ball, he dropped passes. But last year he did a much better job of catching the football, and I think he's only scratching the surface of what he can become as a guy who can catch passes. And look, it's probably not going to be Mitch Trubisky for long this season, but eventually when it's Kenny Pickett and Deontay Johnson, that's going to be a heck of a combination. And look, he was outstanding last season.
Brinson, you have him above guys like Hopkins, Evans, and Brown?
Well, I mean, I don't think Hopkins should be in the top 100. I think that's a more egregious situation than anything else when it comes to the receivers. But as far as Deontay Johnson goes, yeah, I don't mind that. And I think Pete was sort of, we like to bounce this list back and forth on text threads, and Pete was mentioning Deontay Johnson and how he would be higher. The quarterback situation in Pittsburgh was terrible last year. I mean, Big Ben was washed, and that's why he walked away from the game. The question is, will there be enough improvement at the quarterback position with Kenny Pickett and the teeny tiny little hands or Mitchell Trubisky to justify where Deontay Johnson is here? And in addition, do we trust that offense and hashtag blame Canada? I think there are definitely some concerns, not necessarily about the player, but you look at the numbers. I mean, he's hanging right there. I think Mike Evans probably got a little shafted here, just in terms of where he fell on this list. And again, I would push Hopkins out completely. He only played 8 games last year. He's going to be suspended for 6 games this coming season. And so I just don't think it's very likely that he ends up meeting whatever expectations you might have if we put him at 71 there. Deontay Johnson, I like the projection, but maybe a little bit higher than I would have done it.
Pete, before you got here, the talk in the newsroom, and I will say one of them was from a Bucs fan, but was that you had Evans way too low, Mike Evans.
Mike Evans is a tough evaluation in large part because he doesn't get a volume of catches, but he has the big play still in his arsenal. So I think Chris Godwin was a better player last year, which is why Chris Godwin, even coming off the ACL, is ahead of him. And at some point, Mike Evans, his speed is his big play ability to get down the field is going to start slowing down, and when that does, it becomes a greater impact. That's why I have him down lower. Look, I love Mike Evans. He's a great guy to deal with, and he's a big-time receiver. But, I mean, look, could you put him ahead of Hopkins? Maybe. But remember what the Cardinals' offense was when Hopkins was in the lineup and what it was when he wasn't in the lineup.
All right, so Deontay Johnson 70, followed by Hopkins at 71, and then you had Mike Evans at 73. All right, we're coming back with Pete Prisco's top 100 NFL players here on CBS Sports HQ. Amanda Garrett is going to jump in for the rest of the way as we look at 81 through 90, Pete. Trevon Diggs, Cowboys fans are going to say, look at all those interceptions. How is he so low?
They know.
Are we showing 91 through 100, Noah, or are we going to break here? There it is. All right. Bobby Wagner there, a new LA Ram, but it is the LA Chargers who have the most players in the top 100. We'll talk about the Chargers next. They lead the way. But what about the other AFC West teams? How do they compare to the Chargers?
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.